Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's virtual meeting with the Whidbey Island School Superintendents, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Whidbey Island. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. The League works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. We endeavor to make democracy work by offering events like this, by registering voters, and much more. If you are interested in your work, join us. Go to our website at www.lwvwhidbey.org and become a member today. My name is Carol Pulliam. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, and I will be your moderator this evening. I'm pleased to welcome our panelists, Whidbey Island School District leaders. From Oak Harbor School District, Superintendent Michelle Casabula and Communication Director Sarah Foy. From Coupeville School District, Superintendent Steve King. And from South Whidbey School District, Superintendent Joe Moshe. Each district will have time to present information, followed by questions moderated by League member Becky Bolte. Attendees may use the Q&A to send us questions that we may have time to address at the end. League member Karen Volstad will be recording the session, and the video will be posted to our website. Let's begin with Oak Harbor School District. Welcome, Superintendent Casabula and Ms. Foy.
Thank you so much. Thank you for hosting us tonight. I think it's extremely important, the work that you do as League of Women Voters. It's important for our students also in the Oak Harbor Public Schools, and I know with my colleagues, the work to understand before you vote, become an informed voter. So thank you for your work with that in our community. So how much time, Carol, should we do tonight? I'll time keep.
About 25, 30 minutes for you.
Perfect. Well, thank you. So I am new to the Oak Harbor community, but not to the west side. We raised our daughters in the Skagit Valley area, and happy to be back on the west side after a hiatus on the east side for a couple of years. And Sarah Foy and I are brand new to the Oak Harbor School District. We started in July. So this is our seventh, starting tomorrow is our 7th month in the school district in Oak Harbor. So we're really excited to be here this evening and talk a little bit about an opportunity coming up on February 14th. Some of you may think of that day as Valentine's Day, and we like to think of it as our bond day, because that is what is on the February 14th ballot measure is our bond for the Oak Harbor Public Schools, and all ballots are due on the 14th. So I want to talk briefly about what the bond is all about. First of all, a little history between bonds and levies. A lot of people misunderstand the difference between bonds and levies. Bonds are for building, it's for construction, and levies are for learning. So we like to think of bond bold building and levies soft learning. And when we think about learning, it's providing fine arts and supporting athletics and counselors and mental health counselors and support systems that the state does not provide. So our community gets to decide through the levies what are above and beyond that we're going to offer for our kids. So levies are not a supermajority. You need 50% plus 1 to pass a levy. Bonds are a little bit different. It's 60%, which is a supermajority, which means we're one of only 11 states in the United States that require such a significant lift to pass a bond at 60%. So I want to talk tonight about what is on our bond and what are we asking. We have 3 schools on our bond, and when Sarah and I came in this summer, the biggest thing we heard from the community was our bond last February failed. Our community told us that they weren't ready for many reasons. One was there was a lot of projects on the list that our community thought was way too much of an ask for the community to provide support for in the bond. Also, it was pretty complicated. There was a lot of moving pieces to the bond. And a lot of people misunderstood what the Department of Defense funding was all about. So I'm here to say that our school board took all that information and sussed it out, knowing that all of those projects were important. but hearing from the community, they decided to narrow the focus. So that's what this is all about. So we have 3 schools on the list, 2 of which is 80% funded by the Department of Defense, which is pretty unique. We had the Pentagon director fly out a couple months ago and express to our community the importance of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, which doesn't last. It's not in perpetuity. They don't give us the 80% upfront. They ask the community for some skin in the game. They'll give us 80% for these 2 schools, which are on military owned property, if our community is willing to partner and provide the 20%. So those are the 2 schools, Crescent Harbor and Hand in Hand Home Connection, and Sarah can kind of scroll through a little bit at a time. I'm going to go in reverse order, actually. So Crescent Harbor and Hand in Hand would be our 2 first schools that would be constructed, capitalizing on the 80% DOD and then the 20% local through the bond. But our 3rd school would be our last school, and that is the school that we know the most growth here at Oak Harbor has been on the south end toward the Fort Nugent site, which is property our district has owned. And our state is providing 7%, so we're asking our community for 93%. The last thing we heard from our community when we reached out to parents and staff about giving us feedback, and business owners and senior citizens, were what do you want to see that we didn't have on the bond before that you think is important for us to hear from you. And safety and security was number 1 really concern in our community about how do we provide locking buildings with single points of entry so there's secure vestibule entrances. So we have a lot of retrofitting to do. So that last part of this bond is safety and security members for enhancement on those buildings. So the last school would be the Fort Nugent site. And all of this is due to overcrowding. We have many kids in portable classrooms. And as you know, when you build an elementary school back in the 60s, we didn't have full day kindergarten. We didn't have preschool programs. We didn't have many of our complex support systems with occupational therapy, physical therapy, behavior health, mental health, and counseling support systems. So when you think about your own houses, when you build a house, you get a septic plan for how many bedrooms you have, and your kitchen is only designed for your original blueprint. Well, these schools were built without any of those programs, and as we continue to grow, it pushed us out. So it's pushed our elementary students out of elementary schools. So we put them in portables and we put them in another building. So we've moved our upper elementary grades up because we can no longer fit them. So our buildings are deemed failing school by the Department of Defense, Crescent Harbor and Hand in Hand. In fact, we were ranked number 1 of the worst schools in the United States on the Department of Defense list, which is not number 1 like we're number 1. It's not a good number 1. So we really, when we think about what does it mean to be an aging, failing schools, so not only do we have the space in these schools, but our kitchens didn't grow. In fact, Oak Harbor didn't have hot lunch programs when these schools were built. So if you think about it, we have some cafeterias happening in custodial closets. And our infrastructure does not support a remodel. In fact, the state said we'll give you 7% rebuild, but not remodel, because the site that the building needs to come down, which is the south site, is a failing structure. And so that's what these 3 projects are. Oak Harbor Elementary site was built in 1934. We have 2 other buildings, 48 and 83. And so you can see with those 3 buildings on the property, the south building would come down for the 7%. Unfortunately, we don't build buildings like we did in the 30s, which is the historic building, which we'll keep as a historic building and provide some additional early learning support systems with partnership in our community. Our other 2 schools, Hand in Hand and Crescent Harbor, are both on military property. Crescent Harbor would remain on the same property. They were built in 61 and 71. I taught in an open concept building, and that's when I first started teaching in an elementary school in New York. And I can tell you, open concepts, the exterior walls provided your only walls and no interior walls. And so these buildings are really hard to dig into the infrastructure of these buildings because of the material they use. We keep it hidden because we're not allowed to tap into the structures of these buildings because of the material exposure if we were to dig into the walls for electrical and plumbing and heat. So that is the reason for these 2 DoD schools. Crescent Harbor, and then our other one is Hand in Hand. So Crescent Harbor building would be built on the same site. It would be moved to the back so no instructional time would be lost, and we would flip the site. Our other school, Hand in Hand Home Connection, we provide students, education for students from preschool all the way up to age 21. We have 3 different programs: Hand in Hand, Virtual Learning Academy, and our homeschool partnership. So over 600 students come and go from that campus. And that is a military building that they will tear down as soon as they can get us out of there and relocate it in a brand new building off Regatta. And that building gives us a little bit more capacity for more classrooms. Same with Crescent Harbor. We have a couple additional classrooms. So you can see the schematics here off Regatta Ave for the new design project. The other thing that's nice about working with the DoD is they gave us a grant for all the preliminary work. So traffic studies were done, geological testing was done, soil sampling was done, and our architectural plans were done, all working with the community a couple of years ago. Many families, business partners came to the table, and Steve King probably remembers this, but it was instrumental in having this grant to do all the work when initially all the bond projects I've ever done, you didn't have a grant to start the process. Part of the bond money was to start the process. So we're actually shovel ready pretty much. We have the plans 60 to 75% done. We just need to finalize a few interior schematics, but we're ready to go. The other thing about Department of Defense funding that was very clear on our visit from the Pentagon was these funds are not here forever. And so we are, this is our 3rd year, our 2nd year to go out, our 3rd year in the project. And by time this bond would be passed, it would be our 4th year and 5th year by time we can be shovel ready. So this money is 5 to 7 years availability for us. So if we can get it passed, then they'll extend it. But if we can't get it passed, we're on the same tight timeline that it'll go away and go to some other school in the country that is on military installation. So what does it cost our taxpayers? I want to talk a little bit about that. So our bond for the high school, we just paid off in December. That is a big celebration. Our community trusted us, and we have the biggest gathering space, indoor gathering space on the island as our high school, and it gets used 24/7, 365 days a year. That's a busy building, and it wouldn't have been possible without our community supporting that new high school and remodel. That bond was paid off, but what people ended up paying off on that bond, this bond is 30 cents actually less than what they ended up paying in December. So you can see what it costs the taxpayers here. This is an estimate, but the nice thing about it, on the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about what it actually costs. So for $121 million in bond that we're asking our community, with matching funds, we get a total project cost of $237 million. So what does that mean? For every dollar the community gives us in the bond, we get 96 cents matching fund through the state and the Department of Defense. So that's an incredible opportunity. I've been in education 33 years, and I've never seen anything like that. So it's a once in a lifetime opportunity from us for Oak Harbor. You can get tax exempt for different status. You can visit the website and the phone number here for anyone that's a senior citizen or disabled individuals or a widower or widowers of veterans. And I know my mother-in-law was here in Oak Harbor, and my assistant superintendent, his in-laws have both accessed this and were able to get tax exemptions. So they're wonderful at Island County Assessors. You can give them a call. So that is kind of our project overall. It's a big ask for the community. Again, for $121 million bond, we get over $230 million worth of projects to build 3 brand new elementary schools and get our kids out of portables and aging facilities. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I just want to thank you for the opportunity for this.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Kustabula. It's complicated, but you really, I think, does a good job of explaining that, and people will be able to refer to this video that we're recording tonight. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And now it's time for Coupeville School District. Superintendent King.
All right. Well, thank you, League of Women Voters, for having us back, and thankful for the opportunity to share where we are with our community. We do not, like Oak Harbor and South Whidbey, They both have bond measures on the ballot this year. The Coupeville School District does not have anything on the ballot this year, so I'll probably give a little brief rundown of the history of our bonds and levies, and then kind of the considerations, a little update on the considerations that we have right now for potentially running a bond or a levy in 2024. So, and I want to thank Superintendent Moshe for actually helping me with my slides tonight. For some reason, my computer wasn't able to share slides. So big assist down to South Whidbey. So thank you, Dr. Moshe. So I'm going to start by just sharing celebrations and a big thank you to the Coupeville community. We've had a long history of support from our community. In December, much like Oak Harbor, our bonds on our high school were paid off. So we had a bond in 2004, and that was just paid off in December. So very thankful for that. And we too have a beautiful facility at Coupeville High School, and it's often used by our community for various things. And it's a great place for our students to come and learn and enjoy school. We've had a long history of community support. Long before I was here, we've had a history of passing levies and bonds. So we're very thankful to our community, and we take that seriously, being good stewards of their support. Last February, this time last year, we had 3 measures on the ballot, and we were just a handful of school districts that actually passed 3 measures. And we had an educational programs and operations levy measure, and that was a 4-year levy. We had a capital technology levy for 4 years, and then we had a capital projects levy for 2 years. We had considered actually going out for a bond last February, but considering the political climate and inflation and everything else, we decided to hold off on running a bond and instead ran a capital projects levy for 2 years. That keeps our tax rates level, as you'll see in the next few slides, for our community. Also allows us to do a couple or a few maintenance projects over the next couple of years as we consider whether or not to run a bond here in the near future. So only 5 school districts in the state passed 3 levy measures last year, and Coupeville was one of them. So again, a big thank you to our community. Next slide. So this gives you a little picture going back to 2011 of our school tax rate history, and these are tax rates per $1,000 of property value. So going back to 2011, we've always been a little over $2. We actually went up to over $3 in 2016, and we've actually scaled that down the last several years. So our actual taxes for our community, for our school district, have gone down to $1.61 in 2022. So we've been scaling down in our school district. Next slide. The one thing that people will point out, though, is that in 2018, as our school district scaled down on the amount that we were asking from our community, the state actually in 2018 put in state school taxes. So this slide actually shows our history going back to 2011 before 2018. Again, that's our total tax rates. Again, fairly flat, around $2 every year. And then when, or I'm sorry, around $4 every year when you include the state taxes. And then in 2018, that went up with McCleary. And then again, we've settled back down. Again, very consistent tax rates for our community, whether we've run EP&O levies or capital projects or tech levies. It's been very consistent, and even when we were paying off our bonds. Next slide. So this slide I just wanted to show because the green line actually represents our history year by year going back to 2015. The green line is what we had on the ballot measure saying this is what we think our educational programs and operations levy will cost our voters. So if you go back to 2015, we were estimating $1.15, and we stayed with that $1.15 estimate, and then estimated $1.19. The gray or more charcoal line down below actually shows what the tax rates ended up being. I wanted to show this slide to make sure that everybody in our community knows that we're very conservative with our estimates. We kind of like to under-promise and over-deliver. And so when we estimate for our community on the ballot and say we think it's going to be $1.19, and it actually ends up being 89 cents or 83 cents, we believe that's being good stewards. And again, being conservative with our estimates for our taxpayers and our community. So we feel like we've done a good job of that over the years. Next slide, please. So what we're in the process of doing right now as we move through the end of winter and kind of looking forward to spring is we're targeting February of 2024 for potentially running a bond or potentially another capital projects levy. As I pointed out earlier, we have a capital projects levy that's just a 2-year levy that we passed last year. We will either replace that capital projects levy with another capital projects levy or run a school bond. And that will likely happen in February of 24. The issues we're dealing with is very similar to Oak Harbor. We have an aging elementary school building. The original part of that building was built in 1962. So again, really similar to the Oak Harbor schools that they're looking to replace. They're really aged out. And education has changed over the years, and we really need to update that building soon. We actually did a study and survey on that building during COVID, and they're looking at things like the roof that needs to be replaced in the next couple of years. And as most people know, you can't buy a 4-year roof. You're looking at a 30-year roof. It's significant investments to try to remodel that school and update it. So we're actually considering running a bond in 2024 to replace our elementary building. The reasons we're holding off on running that or committing whether or not we're going to run that right now is just the uncertain political and financial climate. We're going to watch very, very closely the bond and levy measures that are coming up here in February. So we'll be watching and rooting for our neighbors to the north and south who are both running bonds, and hopefully those go successfully for them. And if their communities step up and support their measures, we're going to be more likely to run a bond here in Coupeville as well. We're also just watching the finances in our community and making sure that our community will is supportive of this bond. Again, February 24, we're looking at a bond or a capital levy. One of the concerns we have about running a capital levy right now is most of the investments would go towards the elementary school because that's the building that needs it. We're not sure that that's the best idea, given that we need to replace that building. So any money that we invest in that building would end up in the next few years likely being a building that we would replace down the road. So we're reluctant to put a lot of money in that building right now. We really need, and our study and survey showed the recommendation is to replace that building in the near future. The goal of all of this for us is to continue to have consistent tax rates for our community and be really good stewards of our facilities that they've invested so much in. Next slide, please. I wanted to show this slide. This is for planning a potential bond if we did run it in 2024. So as you see here, this gives the history again back to 2015 of our local taxes that we've had on our community. This includes our local levies and bonds. We're currently estimating that this past year in 2022, it was $1.61. This 2023, we're estimating $1.65, and then 2024, $1.63. If we did run a bond, our current study and survey shows that our bond would be around $73 million. If we ran a bond at $73 million with our current estimates, the new tax rates for our community would be around $2.22 for the foreseeable future for the next several years. Again, as you look back in our history, that's pretty consistent with what we've had over the last several years. So we think it's probably a good option to run a bond for a new elementary school to replace that school, make it a safer place for our students and a better place for them to learn. And again, we could do this while keeping our tax rates pretty flat and consistent and be able to upgrade that facility greatly. Next slide, please. So our next steps are to continue to get input from our staff and our community and watch the current state and regional bond and levy outcomes. And then the school board and I will probably, the school board will be considering this in the next couple months and probably make an announcement by March or April at the latest on whether or not we plan to run a bond for a new school or another capital projects levy, which would be a 2 to 6 year measure. And I wanted to include a picture here of our kindergartners, one of our kindergartners showing up at the beginning of the year. And it's really important to us that we take care of these kiddos. And that school and that staff is doing the best they can in an aged facility and making it work. But we really need to look at taking care of these kids very, very soon. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to share. And I shared my email address at the bottom if anybody has any questions, and turn it over to you if there's questions.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent King. Becky, I'll be asking you in 20 minutes or so to see if there are any questions. So thank you, Becky, for watching that. And now I'd like to welcome Superintendent Joe Moshe. And
thank you.
From South Whidbey Schools.
Thank you. I'll see if I can share my own slides and create a slideshow. There we go. I'll see if I can get there. How's that? We got that? Okay. Yeah. So thank you so much. I'm happy to be here with my colleagues from Oak Harbor and Coupeville. And thanks to the League of Women Voters for inviting us. South Whidbey is down here on the south end of the island. We are thriving like our northern colleagues, and I would say we're living in a little bit of paradise, though you know, I could use a little bit more warmth. So in terms of our work this year, we're pleased and happy to note that we're actually gained a little bit of enrollment, which is always a positive thing. We're a little bit above our budget. So that's really something that made everybody a little bit happier. And we're also working on creating a culture of care and belonging. We've spent a lot of time on that this year. The board set 3 goals for our district, one being to create that culture of care. The second one, of course, being around student learning and making sure that we see growth in our students. And the third one is the goal that I'm here to talk about tonight, which is to craft and begin implementing plans for the best use of our district assets in the future of the district, including executing a facilities bond. So the board at their February 22nd meeting will actually decide whether they're putting a bond proposal on the ballot. I anticipate that they will. I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. And my colleagues talked about the difference between a bond and a levy. A bond, the way we describe it, it's like a mortgage. We're borrowing money up front, paying it off over 20 years or so, rather than a levy, which is getting taxpayer money up front. So let's see. We have been in this process for quite some time. We actually started prior to the pandemic. And then once COVID hit, we hesitated on continuing this project because obviously other things took priority. But to date, we have visited every single location to review the conditions. We reviewed our enrollment trends, future trends. We then hired an architectural team to help us analyze the facilities, do a cost analysis, and come up with recommendations with our bond committee. So we did have a committee of folks working on this. So for us, again, our schools are also aging. They are coming to the end of their useful life if we don't do something. They are certainly in need of upgrade. So they were both built in the 80s with some updates done in the 90s. But again, OSPI suggesting a 30-year timeline for school buildings, and we are approaching the end of that timeline. And this is an abbreviated presentation. You can see the entire presentation on our website. So hopefully I'm giving you enough information tonight, but if not, there's plenty on the website and you can always send questions. At any rate, the facility committee put together the 6 guiding principles for this project. 21st century learning and classrooms for today's learning are 2 of the biggest priorities. Again, classrooms are 30 to 40 years old. They've been upgraded technology-wise, but infrastructure, the space, I mean, if we think about our own homes, a home that hasn't been updated for 30 years is probably in need of some love and care. So along with that, it's welcoming and identity. And I'm going to show you some pictures about what that means. But we have, as of September coming up, we will have 6th through 12th grade in a single building, but with 2 very distinct identities. So we want to make sure that we create a welcoming environment for both groups of students. Certainly making sure that our buildings are welcoming, that people can find their way around, and we too are upgrading our safety. We know in today's current environment, it's more essential than ever that we make sure that we maximize single point of entry. We have single point of entry now, but we want to enhance it. Certainly an inclusive environment where all of our students are able to use all of the facilities with ease, regardless of their ability to move about. So we want to make sure they're inclusive environments. And then things that we don't see are the operations and maintenance side, the infrastructure, all of the things that are behind those walls that need to have some attention paid to them. So the photos I'm going to show you are really conceptual designs. We have not gotten into the pure design phase, which would happen if and when the bond is approved. But I certainly can show you some of the conditions of our buildings now and what we anticipate changing. This is the front of South Whidbey High School. That looks like stucco, but it isn't. It is siding that was used in the 90s that is actually separated from the membrane, so water's getting behind there. So we want to change the look of that high school, maybe something more like this, where it's a much more welcoming environment that's been refurbished, and beautiful courtyard area and so on. This is the internal courtyard area, and you can see by the look of this that, again, I'm not sure who designed it and when they designed it, but they used indoor tile in an outdoor space, and it's showing its wear after all of this time. So the conceptual drawings around that are a new courtyard, a place where students feel like they belong and where they would be, they would want to go spend their lunchtime. They spend some time outside, but it's certainly not as welcoming as it could be. Upgrading the stadium. So the track is beginning to fail and our field is grass, which makes it basically unusable except for football season, because once the football players are done on that stadium field, it's mud. So we're looking at turf as a possibility. Again, these things haven't been completely decided, so there's room for the input from our community on the exact design of what we're doing. But this is some conceptual work that we've done around what we think. The stadium also needs updating, as does the press box. Again, classrooms for today's learning. This is a shop class that's turned into a classroom. We need to think about remodeling that space. We still have shop classes, but they are much more technology driven these days. So upgrading that space is part of what we're planning to do. And this is about the welcoming environment. On the left is the current entrance to South Whidbey High School and where the entrance to the middle school would be. We really need to dress it up. We need to make it look more welcoming and inviting for our students. And so again, conceptually changing what the entrance would look like. Certainly wayfinding and safety. Nobody that goes to school in that back part of that hallway where that wire gate is, there are actually students back there, and it certainly doesn't feel like a school when you look at that. Also, all of our parking lots need to be repaved. They haven't been done in many, many years. They've been patched. And we also need to think about the wayfinding for parents who drop off their students and buses that drop off students, and not having the two meet in circulation. Finally, we are not going to be using the campus that you see on the left. That is the South Campus for students, for classes, but we will be using the PE area. And we want our students to be able to get down there without having to get wet as they go back and forth. So we're looking at potentially a covered walkway between the two. And finally, the inclusive playground environment. On the left, you can see it's a original style playground with the wooden structures, still taking out splinters from time to time, It's not the kind of playground that we are able to have all of our students enjoy. So you can see that we are looking for an inclusive playground so that students who perhaps have different mobility are also able to enjoy the play structure. Again, if we think of our own homes, these bathrooms are 30 years old. We're looking to improve them and also add some single-use restrooms to our facilities. And outdoor play environments, covered play areas. As we all know, it rains a lot here in the winter, and we want our students to be able to enjoy the outdoors. Even in spring sports, for example, when students start to play fast pitch or baseball, being able to use outside areas and not have to practice in the gym and so on. So making sure that we're addressing all of the educational needs that our students have. And of course, operations and maintenance, mechanical systems, heating systems, making sure that we're moving toward green standards and so on. So all of that is part of this bond. And again, I'm going very, very quickly for tonight, but we have much more detail if folks are interested. And this is the biggest part of the project, actually, is we have a 150 square foot roof that is in need of replacing. And it has met and exceeded its 30-year lifespan. So again, roofs need to be replaced, and this one is due. So here are the priorities summarized. They're building improvements, playground improvements, heating and cooling system upgrades, covered structure, covered walkway, and interior flooring upgrades. That's again just a picture of that shows the need for replacement of roof structure and so on. And the high school upgrades we talked about: siding, windows, roof, locker room upgrades, classroom reconfigurations, and so on. And certainly finishing up there with the courtyard upgrade. So bond projects are expensive. We looked at the cost of replacing the building. We had some folks ask, why aren't you just going to replace the high school? Because it would be cost prohibitive. And our buildings are still able to be remodeled. They don't have to be replaced. And this would extend their life another 30 years. So we think it's something that the community would appreciate, is us being cost conscious. This bond, and I'll get to the total in a minute, is an $80 million projected bond cost. But they are not inexpensive. When you do bonds and you do big construction, not only has the price of material gone up, but there are other costs that are considered soft costs. The cost of running the election, the cost of all of the fees for permits and design and any furniture and equipment and all the miscellaneous costs. They're almost as much as the actual construction, which is shocking but accurate. So in all, we're looking at an $80 million bond. The construction costs we're estimating at almost $45 million. And then there is the inflation adjustment. And as we heard from Michelle, these kinds of things don't happen the day they're approved. It takes time. It could be a couple of years before we actually put a shovel in the ground down here, which means the cost has to be accounted for, because that cost could potentially go up. It could also potentially go down, but we don't know that. We do our best estimate at this point. If we can do all of the projects and not use all of the 80 million, we certainly wouldn't use it, but we're estimating an $80 million bond. And I hope my colleagues don't mind, but I've put up the actual costs of projects in the districts for 2022. Actually, I mean the cost of all of bonds, levies, capital projects in total. And South Whidbey, if you look down toward the bottom, is at 99 cents per thousand of assessed value, which is the lowest in the area other than Index. And Index, as you may know, has 30 students in the district. So we're really at a very low rate. We haven't run a bond since the 90s. And so that's our current tax rate. And this is the tax rate of districts with like assessed value. So if you look at that assessed value, we're at about 5.8 there. And other districts that are similar, again, look at the total tax rate in those areas. And the reason I show this is because folks asked about it. You know, how do we compare with other districts? Are we paying more or less? And so we've put that information out to our community. So our cost for this estimated would be in total $1.49 per $1,000 of assessed value. And that, when you look at it for that $500,000 home, the cost of the bond is about $1 a day or just under $30 a month. So that's what we're looking at. And again, here is the information from our website. If you just go to our website and click on our district and look for the bond under there, you will see all of this that I shared with you. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I went at 100 miles an hour because I knew my time was limited. So there you go.
Thank you, Dr. Moshe. That was great. And all three of you is so articulate. And thank you, Sarah, for being our backup and support team for Michelle. Becky, what do you think's going on out there? Do we have any questions?
Well, we had one question from Lynn Whitley for Michelle and she said, great job enlisting your faculty members and sharing important facts about this bond proposal. And her question was, the new facility on Fort Nugent, where can we learn more about the traffic road changes that will come to enhance traffic safety at the new school site? And Michelle answered that already, but do you want to elaborate on that, Michelle?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So one of the biggest things that, you know, like Joe was saying, our schools were built, you know, they're beyond their lifespan. And when I think about traffic in Oak Harbor, when schools were built in the 60s, we had buses and very few parent drop off and pick up, where we've seen an increase with parents driving their kids to school, which has been a domino impact, I think, to our greater community, not only here in Oak Harbor, but on the island during those peak drop off and pick off times for all schools. So with these three designs, including the new school out at Fort Nugent, the buses are completely removed on their own separate route from parents. So they're two different sides of the buildings, which gets parents off the road. So there's not a road backup like we're seeing in some of our other elementary schools on main roads. And I think those are kind of the new current models in elementary constructions in particular across the state that we've seen those designs. So Fort Nugent site, that the traffic site, as well as the other two schools, you can see on that design that the parent traffic is pulled off the road and into the property, and the buses are in a very separate space for that. So it divides traffic so it's not sitting out in a main road. So each one has an extensive traffic study. I don't know if anyone's ever read a comprehensive traffic study. They're very complex, but in summary, not a lot of road work would have to be done, but we would do walkability routes with the city, in partnership with the city, for walkability routes.
Okay, and thank you, Lynn, for that question. And I don't see any more questions, but as we have people watch this later at the recorded version, I'm sure everyone, all of our superintendents would be happy to entertain questions by email or phone calls or whatever might come up after this session.
Of course. Thank you, Becky. Appreciate your help.
Sure.
Well, that concludes our session for this evening. Do we have any last words from any of the superintendents? I think you all did a marvelous job and gave us lots of great information. So thank you so much. And thank you all for attending this event. Thank you, Becky and Karen, for your wonderful support. And for Superintendent Moshe King, Ms. Kuska-Sabula, and Ms. Foy for your participation. And one final note, ballots are arriving. I have mine. In fact, they're in the ballot box. If you haven't received a ballot in the next few days, contact the auditor's office at 360-679-7366. If you choose to mail your ballot, Remember that it must be postmarked on or before February 14th. There are also secure drop boxes located throughout the county where you can drop off your ballot. To find one located near you, go to elections at islandcountylaw.gov. If you or someone you know has not registered to vote, or voters, you can register online or in person at the auditor's office up to 8 p.m. on election day, and that auditor's office is in Coupeville. Good
Just
night.
before
Go
we
ahead.
depart, I have one thing to say. Our bond, if the board selects it to go on the ballot, will be April 25th. So,
Wow.
so the ballots will go out to folks in early April for South Whidbey. So don't be looking for a ballot now and think you didn't get it. It'll come out in April, assuming the board approves this at the end of the month.
Thank you, Dr. Moshe. This is for Oak Harbor School District. This
The bond-
election, the ballots now are for the Oak Harbor School District. So we'll be looking again. Maybe we'll get together again in April. Wouldn't that be fun? Okay, everyone. Well, I'm Carol
Thank you.
Pulliam, co-president at League of Women Voters Whidbey Island, and thank you so much. Good night and be well.
Thank you.